Good morning, everybody. It's time to go. Please join me in welcoming the chair of Nationals 2026, Kelly Stead.
Feel it's right above my eyes. I guess you can hear me all right. I've been accused of a lot of things, but being quiet has never been one of those things. But I will try to keep it at a reasonable tone for all of our West Coast friends who are still trying to wake up and let the coffee kick in. As Marvin said, I'm Kelly Skaggs. I'm the CEO of Fellowship Hall, Alcohol and Addiction Treatment Center in Greensboro, North Carolina, and it is my pleasure to be here with you, serving as the chairperson of this year's annual conference. I'm also a member of the NAATP Board of Directors, and I want to welcome all of you to Amelia Island. If you haven't been here before, I hope you're getting to enjoy a little bit of it and take it all in. It's got Spanish moss, sea salt, air, and a really relaxed, laid-back atmosphere. And I don't know about all of you, but I think that's a great way to start a conference like this. We may be talking about technology and AI, but it keeps us grounded in the people that we serve, when we can kind of focus and relax our energy a little bit. So I'm really excited about what we have in store for us. Personally, for me, it's been a real honor to serve as the chairperson of this year's conference. Although I get to stand up here in front of all of you, I can't take any of the credit for this. This type of event, as many of you know, doesn't happen by chance. It's a lot of hard work and behind-the-scenes effort, and the staff of NAATP have really been the backbone of making this happen. So when you see them these next couple of days, please be sure to give them a big thank you. I'm not going to begin to try and name everybody. We had their pictures up a minute ago, because surely I'll forget somebody, and then I'll feel terrible the whole conference. So I'm going to let Marvin handle that part. But I want to personally say thank you to the team, because they've made this event what it is going to be, and I know it's going to be spectacular. One of my favorite things about this conference every year is the coming together of all the leaders in this space. It's one of, as Marvin said last night, one of the few opportunities that we all get to gather in one place and share ideas and have conversations and make connections. And I look forward to it each and every year. I'm also grateful for all of you who made the trip to be here. Some of you have come great distance to be part of this conference, and I'm so grateful because, again, the things that I hear and the conversations I have, I take that back and apply it to the work that I'm doing every day, and I hope that you'll be able to do the same. So the theme this year, as you're probably well aware, is future-proofing treatment, technology, and a people-centered workplace. And that could not feel more relevant right now. We've been having conversations for years about adapting to the technology that's coming. We've got AI, digital health tools, we have telehealth, data analytics, all of the things that we've been talking about, and they're here now. They're in front of us. It's not a, how are we going to deal with it? It's part of the daily operations for us. And the question that we're wrestling with now as a field isn't whether we're going to adopt the technology, it's how can we do it in an ethical way and keep the people in front of us at the forefront of the conversation. So at the end of the day, I know none of us probably got into this field because we wanted to look at spreadsheets, analyze data, or look at pretty dashboards, although they're very pretty. We got into it for the people. That's what the work is all about. And I know when those individuals walk through our doors at our treatment facility and they don't feel like they have a whole lot left, to see them leave in whatever period of time that may be with a little more hope, that's the real reason that I know I do this work, and I'm sure it's why you're here as well. And that's what we're talking about protecting and future-proofing, is that work that's so critical to what we do. Before I give up the mic, and I know some of you are probably hoping I do that quickly, I want to highlight one really important piece of this conference that NAATP intentionally added a few years ago, and that's the Women's Leadership Luncheon, and that happens tomorrow. So if you're a woman in this field. I hope that you will join us tomorrow for that conversation. It's an opportunity for us to share perspectives and to connect, and really it's open to people at all levels of leadership within your organization. Everybody has something important to contribute to that conversation. So I hope that you'll put that on your calendar and be a part of that. I just had to put a small plug in for that because it's been around just a few years and it has grown exponentially every year, which really speaks to the growth of our field. All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the the chairperson of the NAATP Board of Directors, Ms. Jamie Vink, and she has led our organization with integrity, clarity, and with compassion for the work that we do. And I am so grateful to have the opportunity to serve with Jamie on the board. And it is my pleasure and my honor to introduce her this morning.
Thank you, Kelly, for that beautiful opening. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Vink, and I have the honor and privilege of being the board chair for the National Association of Addiction Treatment Providers. First and foremost, I want to thank you for sharing all of your precious time with us. As Kelly mentioned, I know that many of us traveled across the country to be here, and we don't take your presence lightly and are very grateful. You know, as I thought through what I wanted to say to each of you to open up the meeting this morning, the only thing that kept coming back for me was last night. How many of you were in the audience last night? Good. A beautiful, beautiful evening. And we got some pretty important lessons. First of all, Phil Rutherford, an award recipient and board member, taught us about attending to the little problems so they don't turn into the bigger problems. That really resonated. And the other thing is we got to hear from Pia Melody's son a heartfelt tribute to the work of his mother, and more importantly, what she meant to their family as mother, grandmother, and what she held dear about her work, specifically very touching to hear the place that the Meadows held in her heart. And again, the legacy of her work going on. We got to hear the Jays talk about the importance and enduring value of family work within our systems, within our centers. And we got to listen to the ASAM docs talk about the importance of the value of what they bring to the work and how it helps us support us in all of our patient care. And so again, to me, last night was so meaningful, so beautiful, and it took on a vibe of almost a Christmas Eve sort of thing. And so that would make this morning, Christmas morning, which is kind of cool when you think about it. And I like to think about the 2 days that lie ahead as the gift that the hardworking NATAP team, board, and the conference committee have given to you. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this incredible gift. And with that, I will officially call the meeting to order and turn it over to the NATAP CEO, Marvin Ventrell.
Well, good morning again. How's everybody? Good? Are we lucky to be here? Yeah, what a beautiful place. I'm from the mountains. I grew up in Montana, and I lived in Colorado most of my life, and I miss the mountains. But when I see the ocean, though, I feel kind of overwhelmed. It's a powerful, peaceful thing, and I just wanted to say to you all this morning that everybody doesn't get to be here in a place like this, and I need to be grateful for that, and I am grateful for that. I'm grateful for all of you. To the wonderful women who are leading our organization, I want to say thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Jamie. Jamie is is our current chair. The way our board works is that a new chair comes in every 2 years. So I get to work with a new amazing person who has worked his or her way up the chain of offices in NATAP for this position, and they don't do it for the pay or the glory. That's for sure. They do it for the things that Jamie talked about. Last night, I love our opening night. I always say, typically say on this morning, if you haven't been, please come. It's part of the package that you pay for, and it's sponsored by folks that make the dinner possible, and it's special. 10 years ago, NATAP's been around for 47 years. It's done 47 years of amazing work with amazing leadership. But organizations have ebbs and flows, as I have said before. And when we were going through a transition about 10 years ago, when I was given the privilege of becoming CEO and bringing on a team of amazing people, and that opening night, I said, I want to have an opening night. Let's have that be the thing where the community comes together. And it wasn't like last night. People were talking while I was talking. How dare they, right? They were coming and going. They were making deals. And it didn't feel like a community. It wasn't. Last night, as I stood up here, every single person in the room was engaged, and I watched you as every other speaker came up and spoke, and every single person in this room was silent and engaged. And that doesn't happen everywhere. It doesn't happen at every conference. It happens when a community actually exists. And that's what we have created here at NATAP, and I think it's a very special place. It's the place where the best providers are found in terms of both quality and value systems, and that is what we're going to continue to build. My honor this morning is to talk a little bit about the state of our association and the state of the profession and make some observations about that before our amazing keynote speaker comes up. So I want to talk about community a little bit more. We come together each year at this time. We come together as a professional community. It's the 47th annual convening. That's a lot of years of convening. But it's not just a conference, it's an annual meeting. Most of you are members of the association, some of you are not. Thank you for your membership. Thank you for understanding that the collective of our work makes us all better. To those of you who are newer to the meeting or are not members or visiting, welcome. It's wonderful to see your faces. I hope that what you experienced this week is something that indicates to you you would like to be a part of this. There's a younger CEO of a treatment program in our membership who I spoke with recently. I hadn't really gotten to know him very well, and he said, "Marvin, he's young enough to think that if you're my age and you're in a position of authority, that you've done something extraordinary." And I liked it, almost like really respectful. I was like, "No, I'm a knucklehead, just like everybody else." But what he said was, I was a little bit lost when I started my program. I was still fairly new in recovery. I'd gone to some meetings. I didn't like it. I didn't like the scorched earth competition that I was seeing, and so I came to a NATAP conference. I heard you guys speak, and I said to myself, this is where I belong. I found my people. And that's super meaningful to me to hear from a member, and I think he's not the only one who feels that, and we've worked hard to build that. This is a meeting of the membership. It's part of our bylaws system. And Jamie has called it to order, and we'll close it in a couple of days. And during this meeting, we will learn things, we will share things, we will make decisions that move forward. NATAP does what it does in order to serve its members. We lead with our leadership and push, but mostly we listen and hear what it is that you say you need, and we try to deliver that to you. That's our job. It's a membership association. And again, as we come together in that respect, there's a uniqueness here in that we come together with a shared value system and a shared purpose. We're not bifurcated. We're not 100 different interests. We don't agree on everything, but we share a core. As a trade association, we are dedicated to making your operation successful. As a professional society, we're dedicated to something greater than that. We're dedicated to an ideal, a shared vision of recovery for all, through the advancement and sustainability of our work. And then it gets even bigger than that. We believe in the actual possibility of human transformation. That's what happens in treatment. You go from sick to well. You go from not knowing who you are to knowing who you are. You go from being an isolated person living lonely and scared and in the world to being part of something, right? So many of us experienced that. That's what happened with me. And so it is this human transformation that is the core of our work. So as we move forward, I want to thank there are a lot of sponsors, can't thank them all. You'll see the signage throughout, but I especially want to note the premier sponsors who come forward each year. And they are Ashley, Karen, Cumberland Heights, and Hazelden Betty Ford. Could we all give these folks a round of applause? And Kelly chaired the committee, and here are their names. Not gonna name them all. We're gonna move along, but each year a content committee. The administration of the conference is staff driven, but the content is community driven. Annie Peters, our director of education, and I kind of lead that group along with the chair, and then members of the board and members of the membership who are not members of the board join that group by volunteering. So know this for next year in DC 2027. And we can't take everybody because, well, you can have a committee that gets too big, but these are the folks who came forward and helped shape what we deliver this week, which is something that as the participants in this committee prepared comes from you. Right? It's a program developed by the people who come to the program. I want to thank my staff. We are small but mighty. We do a lot with a little, and you will see them all around. I want to name them. Katie Strand is our Chief Operating Officer. She and I were the individuals who came in 10 years ago and began. And Dick, you can clap if you want for Katie. I think that's a really good idea. Dr. Annie Peters came on in 2020. I've known Annie for a long time, but I hired her in 2020 to be research and education director, and she's the executive director of our Foundation for Recovery Science and Education, and she has made us so much better. So thank you, Annie. Pete Thomas has been with us now for quite a while. Pete is super smart. He runs our quality assurance program. He's the ethics online marketing guru. And a quick anecdote about Pete, he's very reserved. He's thoughtful. He speaks after listening. And I said, Pete, when I don't want people to just tell me yes, I don't want a yes man, right? I want you to feel free to disagree with me. And after about 2 weeks, I said, Pete, could you just not disagree with me a little bit? So I could catch my breath. Zena Rodriguez is our director of membership and marketing, and she has lifted us. We've known Zena. She served on our board for a long time. She's absolutely fabulous. Most of you know her. She's been in the field for years, and she directs the membership development and development program along with Crystal Leibarger, the member specialist, and they do a fabulous job. They work really, really hard, and they have made us better as well. Thank you, guys. Kayla Hewitt does everything. Her title is program specialist because we can't come up with a title that just says she does everything, but she does. She's fabulous. She does great work. So much of the conference administration, from the apps to all the technical systems, she builds all those, and she's just fabulous. Kayla, she's not in the room because she's working, but let's acknowledge Kayla as well. Zane Strand is one of the truly good human beings on this planet. He's just a good guy. He doesn't have a bad bone in his body, and he is our customer specialist and works with the speakers and makes everybody welcome and gets all of this organized for us. Zane, you're the best. And Mark Dunn, a hugely significant part of our work is public policy in Washington and in the States. Mark Dunn is one of the most experienced public policy advocates lobbyists in Washington. He has access to folks who most people don't have access to. He works rather quietly, which is where the decisions are made. And Mark is our director of public policy, and you'll hear from him in the public policy session later. But he just has done a marvelous job for us for a very long time. Thank you, Mark. I introduced the board of directors to you last night ineptly, but I did do it, and I'm not going to do it again. But these are our board members that hold the organization together. They are the governing body, and we wouldn't be here without the board of directors. Nor would we be able to hold this conference without the exhibitors. Please spend time in the exhibit hall. Come to the sessions, go to the exhibit hall. Come to the sessions, go to the exhibit hall. Spend as much time in there. They're wonderful folks, and this conference relies on them to do what they do. So we're grateful to them as well. I want to thank Elios Health for sponsoring the app. It's a good app. If you haven't loaded it, load it. It'll tell you everything you need to know. And tonight, please, members and non-members, come to the Mix, Mingle, and Explore NATAP membership session at 4:45. It'll be really nice. It's a relaxed, fun gathering that Zena and her team run, and the board members will be there. And after that, I don't have a slide for it, but we added a session this year. After that, we have a special session called a town hall where one of the industry insurance payer executives will work together with one of our payer specialists in one of our treatment centers to talk about reimbursement. It's going to be really interesting. So feel free to stay late and attend that as well. I want to tell you that we are strong. Our association is strong and getting stronger. We've done good work for 47 years, but we are not satisfied, and we are building. To put it very as succinctly as I can, our job is to develop high-quality ethical treatment and to help our members deliver high-quality, best practice ethical treatment. And then we want to distinguish those who do that. There are 30,000 identified treatment programs in the United States of some kind on the SAMHSA locator, right? We represent a microcosm of that. Frankly, we only want to be a microcosm of that because you have to qualify for membership in NATAP, and we want to distinguish you from the herd, and we do that, and we amplify your services. So that's our job. We are anchored by our provider membership. That's the seal in the middle. This seal means something when it's on your materials. It means that you are a NATAP member and you've committed to something and you've qualified. NATAP provider members are licensed and accredited treatment providers who follow our ethics code and agree to be removed if they don't. And that happens. It also happens that we call them and point out a mistake and they fix it. That's the best result. We also have supporter members. Those are folks who provide addiction support services, but not necessarily licensed and accredited clinical services. And then we have a very important category called the affiliate category, and these are the folks who support us with their product, from billing companies to tech companies, and they are very important to work of all of this. So that's the community that brings us all together, and those are the people you find in the AID. So this is how you get there. I tell people, if you want to find good treatment, go to the AID. It is transparent. It doesn't prioritize anybody over anybody else. It just lays out the information in an objective fashion for everyone to see. And we always like to say, the deeper you look at an NAATP program, the better it looks, and you don't have any confusion as to what they do or who they are. And that's part of what Pete makes sure happens. So we're building resources. The Quality Assurance Guidebook sits as the cornerstone of our work. It is 12 core competencies of providing addiction treatment with 60 guidelines, commentary, and implementation actions to help you be the best program you can be. Last year, we released a landmark publication, NATAP Addiction Treatment National Rate Benchmark Report. It's the first time this data has been revealed in this way. Payers are required to dump their rates into this national database, and if you know anything about this, you know that it's indecipherable. with these machine readable files, and you need a special technology to sort it out. And our team, together with Third Horizon, has done that, and we produced this national report. You'll hear from those folks later today, and then later this year, you will very soon actually, you will see the beginning of our state-by-state reports. We're going to produce 50 individual state-by-state national rate reimbursement benchmarks. And those are coming soon. We're starting with 4 states and building from there. Advocacy is key. We help you with advocacy on the ground in your states, and our focus, of course, is policy in Washington, D.C. And every 2 years, we produce the salary survey, and this is the only product of its kind that indicates what the workforce salary construct is across our members. We are grounded in our code of ethics. I could talk about the code of ethics for a long time. I have talked about it for a long time, but this is what our members comply with. And we even have a complaint process by which individuals, anyone can issue a complaint, and we research that. We receive very few complaints against our members. We do receive a lot of complaints against non-members. We can't do much about that. We try to do a little bit to help the consumer, but it's our members that we hold accountable. The Foundation for Recovery Science and Education is no program of ours is more important than measuring outcomes. This is a massive project. Annie Peters will talk about it later in the conference. The 2026 report is out, and it includes data from 202 addiction treatment centers. There's nothing else like this. Over 400,000 episodes of care, and we are learning amazing things. And with AI, we're going to learn more amazing things. And so many of you are forced data sites. Only NATAP members can be forced data sites. It doesn't cost anything. It costs your membership dues. We have core benefits that come with that, and then there are fee-based benefits in addition if you want to do those. But this is the work that was neglected for a long time and is now part of it. I want to alert you to a program we just launched. It's a new NATAP AI series towards sensible, safe, and effective AI implementation for SUD treatment. We're going to start with a webinar on May 25th, and then we'll have an M2M. That's the member-to-member forum where you discuss what's happening, right? It's not a talking to you, it's a talking together with you. And then that's followed by a C2C, which is our CEO to CEO program, where just CEOs talk about how this is looking, with the ultimate goal of producing a guidebook, a toolkit for you. And it's just a fast-moving thing. I mean, talk about an iterative document. It's going to be changing day by day, but we'll get started and try to provide the guidance that the field needs. We have 77 new members since our last conference. I think that's absolutely amazing. So these are the folks that have joined NATAP since the last conference. I hope we have even more before we get to DC, but that's the kind of growth that we're experiencing, and it speaks to me to the need for the association. It's tough out there. And that creates a need for a professional society that brings us together. And so I'm so gratified that these folks have qualified. So gratified, in fact, that I asked AI if it would please present this to us in a spectacular fashion, because this is kind of boring. And it did that. Nothing? Yeah, see? All right. Whoa, Marvin, you used AI. Yeah, well, that's what I said, make it spectacular for an audience. And so I will let it know that it wasn't that big of a hit. But then I said, okay, let's make it, what does a market analyst need to see? In terms of the growth pattern. And I'm asking it now to please produce that growth pattern. And there it is. This is the growth pattern of membership from last year that lead. And you could learn something from this. This is a very simple one. But, I said, should I do this? I think it's kind of cool. And now I'm thinking, well, it wasn't all that cool. Maybe I won't do it next year. So I want to talk about the composition of the field a little bit. I want to talk about our membership. Field consolidation has been a constant in our field for a long time. This bubble chart, which you guys have seen ad nauseum, is updated periodically by Pete, so I can see what's happening. This is our membership. The size of the program by number of facilities, not but necessarily by revenue, is indicated by the size of the dot. So all those little purple dots, those are single freestanding programs. And that used to be the composition of our field. Imagine a time in the 70s, more or less, when that's what the field kind of looked like, all little purple dots. But that has changed. Consolidation is a reality in the healthcare system. We are part of the healthcare system. It's a reality in really the American marketplace. And so what happens is we are a society of all kinds of members and sizes. In fact, we represent the entire continuum. Right? It's not just, people think it's just residential care. It's not just residential care. And we have 12 revenue categories ranging from under $3 million in gross annual revenue to over $250 million in gross annual revenue. And we represent that entire continuum. And some companies, of course, as you know, are publicly traded large companies that far exceed $250 million. So it's important that we have this big tent and that we're all part of it. But regardless of your size, you are grounded in SUD, and we see more increasing levels of behavioral health integration, which is another movement within the field. State of SUD operations. I listen as best I can to hear what you're saying, and this is what you're saying. How are you doing? What are you feeling? You're feeling disruption in the marketplace. And you're feeling disruption in the workforce, in commercial insurance reimbursement, in pharmacology, in tech, and AI, and AI. That shouldn't say AID. That's the Addiction Industry Directory. That's a good typo. But Medicare and Medicaid. There is a disruption in our notion of spiritual recovery. Everyone's not focused on it. They need to be. Certainly unethical marketing continues. I don't need to talk to you about the political environment of our country. And there's just a general social malaise or sense of discomfort. And so we live with that. It's not easy, but it's okay. I want to suggest to you that it's part of the natural course of our existence and always have been. Bear with me for a minute when I talk a little bit about how disruption leads to evolution. We have in our experience before and after moments. What was it like before the iPhone? What's it like after the iPhone? It's very, very different. All right. And these things constitute, archaeologists, historians, anthropologists talk about how they constitute revolutions in human development. 70,000 years ago, the human brain changed. Right? Homo sapiens' brains grew. It's called the cognitive revolution, and it created cultures. Cultures weren't part of that before this happened. Only 12,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution changed our world entirely. What came out of that? It was disruptive. Civilizations, the great civilizations of Mesopotamia, and the Roman Empire, and the Greek civilizations came out of that. That's followed by the scientific revolution only 500 years ago, the Renaissance, and the awakening, and it creates a modern analysis that doesn't rely on old-fashioned ways of thinking. So we continue to live in this scientific revolution. The Industrial Revolution is a subset of it. It comes along in the middle of the 19th century, and out of that comes our modern economies. And now, 100 years ago-ish, let's say, the technology revolution began, and it created a connectivity and rapid information access and processing that never existed before. Sometimes I wish it was before. It seems overwhelming. It's an amazing tool, and this is where we are. So we think about the computer in the 50s and 60s and 70s. I remember, sorry, younger people, but I remember when the fax machine came along. You're telling me we can put a piece of paper in there and it'll go somewhere else? Email changed everything. The internet changed everything. The smartphone changed everything. And now artificial intelligence is a disruption that we are going to work with, embrace, be careful with, and create guidelines around, and it will lead to an evolution that makes us better than we've ever been. A couple of comments about AI from someone who is not a technology expert, but has been listening and trying to learn. I think it's hard to put our arms around this AI concept. I think that it's hard to understand where where we begin. Zena did a survey of all of our membership recently. Where are you at with AI? What are you doing? What do you need? And what and how are things going? And it produced a lot of information. What we learned is that people are on a long continuum of beginning AI to having some advanced practices that are really working. But it helped me to know that it's useful to make two critical case use distinctions when we talk about artificial intelligence. It's not just one thing. Right? AI for operations, billing, call centers, all kinds of operation things, that's one thing. And it's very promising. Much of it is ready. Much of it is being used. Therapeutic AI, being the counselor, that's another matter. That's another matter altogether. It's not human. AI lives in a constrained universe. Human beings do not. I see colleagues. I know how far away you are. I know what it means when Felicia's nodding her head. That's a dimensional capacity that I have that artificial intelligence does not. There's an article in the New York Times this morning about physicians and AI, how they're using it, but there's no replacement for putting your hands on the patient. And I served as faculty in a medical school for a number of years. The dean then said to me, and teaches his students, the best information you have is patient history, talking to them, and putting your hands on the patient. And that analogy continues for therapy. Therapists can have AI as their best friend. It's not a replacement. Okay, so those distinctions, we create guidance around those separately, but also understand at a basic level that there are two primary forms of artificial intelligence. One is LLM. This is what we see mostly. We ask it a question. It gives us data that we have fed it. In fact, if we fed all the AI 90 pieces of information that said the sun is blue and 10 that said it was gold, when you researched it, it would tell you the sun is blue. Right? So we control this. We dump the information in, we feed it, and it gives us back data in an amazing way. That's different than agentic AI, right? These are the agents, these are the worker bees that we can actually send out, as it were, to do work. And it's wonderfully exciting. It's very complicated. It requires great attention. We are using it for certain levels of research and checking it and checking it and checking it. But those are the distinctions that help us, I think, and certainly help me guide us forward. So moving forward, remember, AI is our friend. This technology is our friend. It works for us. We do not live in the constrained environment that it does. We're in charge of teaching it. It will develop where we put the money. That's how that works. It can be the best sidekick we've ever had. And it will be okay. This disruption will be okay if we lean on our community and build it together. Remembering to be guided. We always need to be guided. What is the North Star? The North Star is recovery for our patients. Measuring that, and integrity, and the integrity in which we deliver it. So, I want to introduce our keynote speaker. Mark Johnson is the founder and CEO of Ascendant Growth Partners. Ascendant is a business strategy firm focused on helping a wide range of businesses navigate the challenges of growth and transformation. Previously, Mark served as Chief Strategy Innovation Officer at Huron Consulting. His insight is the result of a wealth of experience in many fields, including having served as a nuclear powertrain surface warfare officer in the U.S. Navy. Mark has been a strategic advisor in the healthcare industry for over 30 years. He's the author of numerous publications, including Lead from the Future, How to Turn Visionary Thinking into Strategic Growth. That was named one of the 10 best business books by Forbes magazine at its time. He also authored Reinventing Your Business Model, one of Harvard Business Review's 50 best-selling articles of all time. Mark holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a master's degree in civil engineering and engineering mechanics from Columbia University. He is a skilled and qualified expert and speaker, and please put your hands together and welcome Mark.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a real honor to be here. And, as Marv described, I come with experience generally in healthcare, but my focus has been on strategy and innovation. But I do want to share a little bit of a personal story of why I link pretty well here. My dad was an alcoholic. This was in the 60s, and so the focus there was Alcoholics Anonymous, but it really saved him and it saved our family because he became an admitted lifelong alcoholic. But in my formative years, that wasn't a big problem. In my current family, I've been married to my wife for 23 years. Mental health has been a big issue. My wife wrote a book called Silent Souls Weeping to talk specifically about depression and to share a very vulnerable moment. We lost our daughter to suicide. So, it runs deep, but what you'll get, as was said last night, is somebody who is going to be very authentic with you and also passionate about the topic, because I think I can say with credibility, if I'm in your top 10, if not your number one fan, to continue to make a difference in people's lives and help them to find hope and help them to turn a corner and avoid some of the painful things that, not just what I'm describing personally, but I know you deal with every day. There is a subset that don't make it, and the more we can build knowledge and understanding and apply things, the further we will be able to go. And technology and all the things that are potentially disruptive can also, as I think Marv beautifully described, be an opportunity. So partly, he went through the list and, he described it to me. There are many things facing you which can be kind of scary or challenging. And as you're running a business, you're not only providing to individuals, you have to do both. Facing thin margins, consolidation, workforce challenges, reimbursement, all these kinds of things. And so as you think about those disruptions, they're a challenge to your business and business model. So that's a term that's thrown around a lot. What I'm hoping to do is help with that. How do you deal with disruptive change and turn it really into an opportunity? How do you navigate? How do you put on a set of lenses to start to build a common language? I often use the frame, how do you build a mindset and then a skill set and a tool set by which you can get to the how of moving forward with all of these challenges that create change. And with change that's needed comes not just sometimes incremental, but what we call transformation. So as I talk through, you're probably not going to see a lot on healthcare, and that's by design, because I think we've learned through experience, it's actually better to learn through analogy, where you can say, how does this apply to me when I'm talking about, addiction health or healthcare in general. I will bring in some healthcare examples. And actually right from the top, because it's true, I have worked generally in healthcare and some in provider systems, but on the supply side, I'm just going to put up front one big insight in the work that I've done over the years. And I worked with, I don't know if you've heard the name Clay Christensen, but he wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, talked about disruption. He's actually in many ways the father of defining what disruptive innovation is. But as he applied it to healthcare, we had a simple way to think about it, which was the disruptive opportunity to do something really different was, how do you enable a larger population of less skilled or less wealthy people to do things for themselves. So you could decentralize it out, right? Like I'll describe an example, like the personal computer was a democratizing innovation that enabled people to have computing power in their homes when in the time it was only available in expensive forms in corporations. As it applies to healthcare and this enabling, and I think it applies in your field with dealing with addiction and addiction health, which, as I understand, very much has moved mainstream as managing a disease. How do you move the location of care, from the hospital to the ambulatory hospital to the outpatient setting to the home? And how do you move the specialization of care from the specialist to the personal care provider to the nurse practitioner to the nurse to the caregiver? And I think that still applies. Is what's going to be an ongoing force is the specialization of care and the location of care is what's going to continue to democratize health. Because as you know, I mean, one of the challenges for many, and in my own navigation with my family and healthcare, we've been blessed to have sufficient means to get healthcare, but if you don't, there's been plenty of places that won't even think about insurance. And so many people that suffer with mental health don't have the access because of the nature of the system. So I think with technology and everything's happening is an opportunity to democratize. In rural health, it's another big issue, right? So that's the opportunity where we can innovate to think, how do we provide this access to a larger group of people that didn't have it before? So with that, and as this little bit of backdrop, I wanted to just get a little bit further on disruption since it's a big term. Again, I'm going to take you to something that has nothing to do with healthcare or with your field. But this is a gentleman named Ken Olsen, who was the CEO of Digital Equipment Corporation. This is in the 1960s and 70s. They made mini computers, which were they were kind of right after mainframe computers. There were mini computers and there were personal computers. He was running a very successful business, 60s into the 70s. He had competition. There was a company called Prime and Wang and Nixdorf and HP Computing. There's a whole set of competitors. It was a big industry in the world of mini computing. And this was disruptive to mainframe computing. These were smaller boxes that were in corporate settings. These were $250,000 machines, and they were making about 60% gross margins. They had their very successful business into the 70s, and then everything started to basically fall off a cliff in the late 70s into the 80s. And the interesting thing, it wasn't just Digital Equipment, but it was Prime and Wang and Nixdorf. They all sort of fell off at a cliff at the same time. And you'd say, well, they weren't colluding to poor management, so these were good managers trying to do the best they could. But as you probably figured it out, it was this guy. It was the personal computer that came in with Gateway and Apple and Compaq and others. Whereas this enabling technology, today it's AI, but then it was the microprocessor. It was a really simple, it was simple to apply it. People just put a box around the microprocessor, and they all of a sudden now had this new application called the personal computer, which could go in homes and schools. It was a democratization. Back to the mini computers so expensive. These weren't cheap at the time, but they weren't $250,000. They were $4,000, and they were moving pretty quickly to $2,000. Digital Equipment Corporation, HP Computing, they all could make these computers. They were simple, but they didn't, because why would they? They were listening to their best customers who were saying, give us more mini computing power. And oh, by the way, we're making 60% gross margins on $250,000 machines, actually going towards $500,000 machines. Personal computers were $4,000 machines going to $2,000, and you were making 40% gross margins going to 20%. So herein lies the dilemma. It wasn't disruption because they couldn't do the technology. It was a disruption of their business model. And that's the foundation of the problem that we all face when we talk about disruptive change or technology-enabled change. It's not, you can't really adopt the technology. It's fundamentally impacting the way you work in terms of your processes, your rules and norms, the things you do every day. Your CFO, who he or she's looking at an income statement and a balance sheet and has a very precise way it's done. So you have to get in deeper into the rigidity of the way you do things today, which goes back to, I'll get to, is understanding more deeply what is a business model and how do you change it? Because whether you know it or not, you're working according to a business model. And that business model is designed to repeat things in a very good way, but it's not designed to really mess around with it and change it. Because by keeping it going the way it's going, you create efficiencies and you create the way that you can maintain your operations. So that's the challenge. Now, not to make the challenge worse, because this was the microprocessor was the technology that enabled this disruption to Prime, Wang, Nixdorf, everybody else. The challenge is AI is actually, again, this won't be surprising, but the data might be revealing, AI is really different. Because in the technology world, well, let me first say this. Actually, I was going to show you a data chart. These are why it's particularly hard, is that this change is not centered on any one industry. You know, this mini computer stuff was in the computer industry. This is every industry is facing a massive challenge. The other is the nature of AI, the degree of business model change and impact is unprecedented. And then the third is the level of ambiguity and uncertainty as to the way that the business model is going to change is huge. So we're really facing high degrees of uncertainty. And what we like to talk about in the world of innovation and dealing with it is we have a very low knowledge to assumption ratio. We have a lot of assumptions we need to make about the future and about how change. And it's this ambiguity and uncertainty when you start dealing with how do we work as leaders and managers. We need to not only operate and execute, but we have to be able to have a way that we can take space to be about learning, exploring and discovering to figure out how our business, our operations will need to change. Now, all this is driven by, this is what I want to get to. It's a little bit of an eye chart, but the main point of this in the world of digital technologies, including AI, starting with the mainframe computer in the 1950s, the point of this chart is when you go all the way to the upper right to AI, whether it's, LLMs and then deep learning or generative, it's unprecedented the rate of change from early adoption to mainstream. Even the mainframe and the mini computer, everything was 10 to 15 years. The fastest was mobile at 5 years, but now when we get to generative AI, it's 2 to 3 years. So we're in all of these digital, even within the family of digital, this is unprecedented on how fast it's coming in. And that, again, is the risk, but it's also the opportunity, right? In a faith-based way, it's opposite of fear is love, right? That we shouldn't be fearful. We can focus on hope and love. That's the way, too, is how do we just make sure we can no longer just be, hey, we're doing business as usual. We have to all be really good at lifelong learning, learning as business people, as clinicians, as deliverers of good at the other side of it, just given what's happening. Now, back to the Ken Olsen story or any of these stories that you could cite of disruption, Blockbuster being disrupted by Netflix, is there's a reason that so often the existing established business can't embrace the disruptive change. And oh, by the way, I would just say in your industry, and this is something that I was going to mention, the disruptive change, at least in part, can come by looking at your industry and saying, what are all the startups that are coming that are, they're trying to provide technology and platforms, but do you know who they are and what they're doing and what piece of the puzzle, the value chain they're trying to go after? Because that could be an indicator potentially of how they could disrupt you, in part at least. So, but we've found that there's 6 reasons that companies don't really get to focusing on what they need to do differently. And I just put them all here together. One is there's not a vision for the company as to what it really wants to do differently, given all the things that are potentially disrupting them, like in this case, consolidation and margins and technology and all these things. If you don't know where you're going, right, Yogi Berra quote, you might end up somewhere else. So I'm going to talk a little bit about vision, more than just a vision statement with a mission statement and a value statement. More than that, because that's what you need to get leadership alignment about where you're going. And the second is when there could be a decision, we got to do something different. We need to invest in a personal computer business because that could disrupt us. Well, Ken Olsen and the team, they did look at personal computers, but they put very little resources and they did it very late in the game because they didn't see the early onset of it as being a risk, as well as the fact that they were just doing so well to serve their best customers. And then oftentimes when you do start something new to try to do something in a very different way, companies, especially if they're for profit and they're really driving their financials, they get impatient for these kind of science experiments, if you will, because they're like, well, how is that helping us achieve our revenue growth or our profit growth? And so if it's not achieving things soon enough, then they get impatient. They don't like it not only in terms of the dollar investment, but so often they take people that get pulled over there and they get, well, these are our best people and we need to be doing it. And then there's like competition from the core. All of a sudden, the core business has real challenges. They don't really want to be able to. They got to get everybody kind of fighting fires in that. And then building an experimental mindset means, being patient for growth, being able to test and learn and iterate. Some get very uncomfortable with that in companies because they're used to operate and execute and being able to do things on a very defined timeline and not comfortable with having to make revectors and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, just general inertia, which could get even into behavioral psychology, which I'll share too, on how things work. So these are the 6 common failure modes, and they are actually underpinning on some of individual psychology as well as the organizational challenges in terms of the way the system is set up. So what does this all mean? These are all the challenges. This is kind of maybe the fear side. Here's the opportunity side, which is, I think forevermore we don't have a choice, but those of you, most of you that are leaders and managing these provider systems, you have to think about, you have 2 disciplines you have to do. One is, of course, you have to operate and execute the business, and most importantly, that is delivering quality care to the people and the reason that you're doing this in the first place. And you're going to always want to try to improve that of the way things work incrementally, make it a little bit better. That's still under the guise of operate and execute. This is the area where the knowledge is high, the assumptions are low. You've done it for a very long time. You have processes in place. You use rules and norms by which you guide the organization and the workforce. And that's going to be 80% or more of your time to do that. But you must now think about explore and discover, which is a different kind of discipline. It's where you're thinking about creating the new and different. And it's that experimental mindset. It's that start small approach, spend a little to learn a lot. It's where the knowledge to assumption ratio is very low. It really is about doing a whole different approach to care because of technology, because of pressures that relate to the industry. And this could be 10 or 20% of the time. And it's an and statement. It's not an or statement. And it relates to constantly visioning and thinking about the future while dealing with today. And, there's a tendency to say, well, the tyranny of the urgent, right? All the things, fighting fires and doing things of today, because the discipline on the right is not a rushed discipline. As an example, it would mean when we talk about strategy, the team gets together once a quarter and spends 4 hours and doesn't rush through financial plans or rush through operational plans. It actually talks about threats, or it talks about technologies, or talks about startups, and it says, how do we think about the way our environment's changing? How do things look in 3 or 4 years? What are the implications of these pressures that we face? What kind of new things might we do? Who might we now partner with? And it's iterative. We say, 3 steps forward, a step back, diverge before you converge. It's very different. It's messy. You're dealing with the abstract. So if you smash them together, you're trying to conflate 2 different disciplines. One is we're operating and executing. We're working on a schedule. We're working, very present forward, I like to say. And the Explore Discover is this very much exploratory. We're debating, we're discussing, we're having dialogues. And we're having the what ifs, right? And I'll talk more about that. So this is the 4 things I want you to think about. Again, trying to be as how-to as I can for you. First is think and plan future back. I'm going to talk about that. This comes from Lead from the Future. Second is be relentlessly outside in. Because as you said, or as Marv said, the focus is still on that individual who comes desperately needing help, and really deeply understanding what is she dealing with. And I have an approach we call jobs to be done that might help further really deeply understand what is that job she's trying to get done in her life. And then other different groups that you deal with, jobs to be done of your partners, of the regulatory side of so in other words, it's really getting to this deeper understanding of the customer and the consumer and the partners, because it's by having that understanding that then leads to the third, which is how does your business model, what is it, and how does it need to change? So we need to get past just saying it's a business model. What is a business model, and how do you document it so you can understand how it might need to change, especially with all of these forces that are impinging upon it. Back to the example, that the mini computer business was fundamentally out of business as a business model because of what came in after it. And then finally, I'll give a little bit of my take on the specific role of digital transformation and AI. And so I hope that these 4 things kind of get back to skill set or mindset, skill set, tool set, a little bit of that how do we navigate transformation in the next 3 to 5 years, 2 to 3, 4 years. On the first, I'm thinking and plan future back, giving you another technology example, because it's so simple and straightforward and powerful. We go back to Apple. It was on the other side of the mini computer example. Well, Apple did well then, but then it crashed, if you will. In the 80s, Steve Jobs was fired, but then he came back in the 90s, and things weren't going so well. The personal computer was now getting commoditized. The CEO of Gateway was saying, yeah, it's basically going to be a commodity. This was coming into the dot-com bubble and the crash. And he said, we've got to do something. The fact we have this personal computer, we somehow may be able to extend it. So he looked out in 2001, about 10 years out, and they could envision that there were all these consumer electronic devices, whether these were MP3 players at the time, digital assistants, camcorders, digital phones, etc. And they looked out and they said, there must be something that we can do in this new world, this ecosystem of all these consumer electronic devices. And he said, we could build a digital hub. We can take and put the personal computer at the center of this, and we can create elegant software, and we can be the brain inside, and we can enable all these consumer electronics so that they're not stuffed with all of this, heavy microprocessing stuff and we can make the software, we can be the hub, and make these consumer electronics empowered with the brains from our computer. And so that's what they imagined, and that got them beyond just being a personal computer business, but got them initially into the consumer electronics business. Now, what he didn't share in 2001 was kind of what we know today, that Apple itself got into its own consumer electronic devices. And, you know, this wasn't a perfect vision, by the way. We talk about this like in painting. It was an impressionist painting they had, but they had the idea that they could make their own MP3 player. They had the idea, and that was what happened in 2001. They came up with the iPod, and then in 2003, they came up with the iTunes Store. And by creating the iPod and the iTunes Store together, they transformed the MP3 industry because there's the only one we know. Remember, all the other competitors went away because they made something that was just so simple by the way they put things together. 2007, of course, was the iPhone. That changed things because you had all these different apps on the phone, but really it was a transformation because it created more than a phone. It created a platform, as we know, of all of these different things that could get put on the phone, that businesses, et cetera, that were done there. And then 2010 was the iPad. So anyway, it was looking to the future with a vision, but not just a vision statement. It was actually a vision of the way that you could think about the future of opportunity, of a business opportunity and capabilities that needed to come behind that. Because Apple did need to get into software. You know, it had to get into iTunes software. It had GarageBand. You know, it had all these different software things that needed to get developed and bought. But it created momentum to say, we can do these businesses, we'll need these capabilities to be able to go forward. That's why this is a perfect example of why FutureBack, if you can envision what your provider operations looks like 5 years from now, by being able to say, how will it serve our patients? What capabilities will we need? How do we think about the nature of our business and business model? Then you can work that backwards into the set of priorities for explore and discover that you need to be working on while operating and executing the business. So just a further reason why many people don't do what Steve Jobs does. He was a founder, you know, he wasn't just a managed CEO, he was the founder of the company. It's not a common trait. What he did, or what other great successful tech companies that I've studied, like Amazon, because one is people just discount envisioning things. They say, you know, we can't see the future. It's not predictable. We don't need to envision. But if you can look out, and you can, that's the only way you're going to see the fault lines. You know, it's not about certainty. The future is not certain. But when you spend time in the future by talking about the threats and the opportunities, by talking about what other players are doing, talking about how your business might change and all that, you're not getting certainty, but you're starting to build clarity. Foresight leads to insight, which then leads to aha moments, even if it's only one or two or three of them, that then lead to a course of action. And I can promise you that that's true. If you have the faith and the trust to take your team and spend time in the future, you know, whether that's 2 years out, 4 years out, whatever feels right, and there's a way to kind of think about that. The foresight, by spending time talking about those trends and things, will lead to insights and aha moments. And it allows you to see around corners, especially in a time when it's absolutely critical because of the potential of disruption. The other part of this is, you know, leaders, when they do attempt to do it, they do it the wrong way. And I'll talk further about that, but they go present forward. They basically take the way things work today and they kind of extrapolate that forward instead of thinking about it without being stuck in the way things work today. And then finally, their mindset is not enough explore and discover. They're in operate and execute. So I think you'll appreciate this. You know, why do we also have struggle with future mindedness? we get, because there's human cognitive biases that keep us stuck in the present. And I had so many in the book, I wanted to write them down again, because the list is actually long. There are things like bounded rationality, right? That we are sort of rational to the things that happen today. Automaticity, we're stuck in the things of automating the way we just keep going. Availability bias, confirmation bias. Some of this is a lot from a book from Daniel Kahneman. Hyperbolic discounting, which is the tendency in business to discount everything that's in the future and put much more priority in what you can do today. So just suffice it to be said that it's really hard. That's why a lot of incumbent companies fall by the wayside when disruption comes in, because of all of these biases of the individual in the way we're wired. But then, of course, the organization doesn't often help, because we're often given incentives on what we can do in the short term, especially in public companies that end up, with management incentive compensation plans, which is what they can do for the next year versus what they're providing to really plan for the future. And then the whole ecosystem, the way, again, public companies with stock markets, pension funds, all these things, just make it tighter and tighter, and why it is so hard for large established corporations to navigate it. So what's the essence of leading from the future? Number one, to sustain your growth, and growth isn't just financial, just growth in terms of your people, growth in terms of really being top-notch and helping what you do as an entity, you must plan for the short term and the long term. And as I said, there are two different disciplines. The way you do things in the short term, operational reviews, financial reviews for the next year, et cetera. Strategic planning, that's very much like budgeting exercises and things like that. All completely valid, but they're very different when you're talking about planning for the long term. When you're dealing with the ambiguity of the long term, you're dealing with assumptions, you're trying to have those debates and discussions. It's not an analytical, it's more of a creative process. It's more of an architecting process than the day-to-day, which is more analytical. And by developing an actual vision is the first step. And we have to get past, vision is a one-sentence statement or a two-sentence statement. Vision actually can be envisioning, like Steve Jobs envisioning the digital hub, or envisioning a set of their own consumer electronics products. What can you envision your practice doing, 5 years from now, turning threats into opportunity? What can be the things that you're really good at that you can leverage especially the things you feel like today you're uniquely differentiated on? And then we need to have a way of thinking, back to the problem of present forward. We have to think future back, and I'll show that. And we have to have a process called future back. So vision versus strategy. First, to make a distinction. Vision is about choices of the long term and the future. In today's world, it could be 3 years out, actually. And that's that vision I talked about, like with Apple and Steve Jobs. And can we define a new game we need to play? Maybe we need to really think about a very different way to serve underserved patients, customers that we never thought before. And it's defining the end, the destination. And we use it to, beyond a vision statement, to inspire the organization to give real purpose of what we're trying to achieve. Versus strategy is how you get to the vision. It's the means by which you can make different choices along the way. So there are more near-term choices. How do you win in what you're trying to do, existing game, and it defines the means, the journey to get there, and it operationalizes the vision, the pathway. So one of the things, and this is described at length in the book, is we got to get a better definition and a better understanding of vision and how to deploy it if we're going to future-proof our organization and define that differently than strategy and know the difference. I share this back to this sort of present forward thinking. This was in the 1820s. Steam locomotive technology came out, became the advent of the railroad. But you notice the first response in coming up with this great innovation was to take existing transportation called stagecoach cars and just string them behind a steam locomotive, which I guess it was kind of functional, but it had some serious problems, right? As you can see, people are up on the top and they're getting a full set of soot in their face. This is the classic example of present forward thinking. You're stuck in the paradigm of how things work today. You know, it's all that psychological, behavioral stuff. And that's what I'm saying on how you have to think future back, which means you have to get out of the things and the way they're working today and be able to do a clean sheet approach. In the finance world, we would call it zero-based budgeting. Instead of just adding on to the budget the next year and making, you know, tweaks and sharpening the pencil on it, you'd actually start with a clean sheet and say, we're going to start with zero and figure out what do we really need to build up from there on the costs that we need. Especially when you deal with thinning margins, oftentimes, right? You got to go with a clean sheet to be able to say, how are we really going to transform cost-wise to be able to deal with the pressures we face? So just to put this in real terms, it's present forward thinking is about being analytical and concrete, facts and data driven. Again, 80% or so of what you do. But future back is what could be. Let's start with a clean sheet. Let's focus on the assumptions we're making. Let's make sure to have questions. What are the questions we're asking that we're not constrained by the way things work today? We're not stuck because, especially with AI, the whole point about the challenge of workforce for the future, it not necessarily be incremental. It could be a very different way to think. And you don't want to be, well, this is the way we've always done it. It doesn't mean you'll go with that new and different way, but you want to be able to at least begin to see it and say, how far could we move? So that's the thinking piece, is we have to get the mind out of a present forward way of thinking, so we're not putting stagecoaches behind a new steam engine, and be future back, which allows us to say, maybe there's a whole different way we create a passenger car behind this steam. But if we're stuck in the paradigm of today and all we know is stagecoaches, then I put in the book, by the way, what do you think Goodyear made as their satellite proposal in the 60s, you know, for helping the space race? What do you think it looked like? It looked like a tire. It literally, I mean, incredible. And they argued that there were a lot of good reasons for that, so I'm not going to get in the technical piece of that. We did a lot of work with Johnson & Johnson, and I'll just say quickly, you know, to this point about creating a vision that's more than a vision statement. The whole thing around future back and what we were trying to do was Bill Hite was an oncologist who was running the head of R&D for Janssen Pharmaceuticals, the R&D division of Johnson & Johnson. And they wanted, he said, you know, we got to get to disease interception, you know, because of all the patients that he saw pass away because of cancer. Long story short is they got into, with technology, lung cancer to see how could they intercept much earlier, figure out the process that's manifesting that leads to the disease. But long story short is what they did with J&J is they basically built a vision. It was called the Disease Interception Incubator, and they had a whole vision statement or vision narrative of how we can say in the not too distant future, we'll be able to know the diseases which were susceptible and be able to transform there. And they had a whole long thing there, but that became the North Star for them of all the things they needed to then figure out that was very different than running a pharmaceuticals division, right? Where you're making a pill, you know exactly, you know, you're treating the problem after it's already happened. You know, this gets into all the issues, right? Like, how do you get reimbursed for preventing something from happening in the first place? So it was very challenging for them to do it, but it started with a powerful narrative, a story, not just one sentence about how that future could look like. Now this gets into process, very how-to. This is often how we work with companies to do future back, which it's pretty straightforward. You know, you got to start with who you are today, know thyself. Baseline, what's working, what's not, what are the threats you're dealing with, what are your measures of success, what capabilities do you have, what do you aspire to? Is it a growth challenge, like we want to double our size, or we just want to get 10% growth year over year, whatever it is, or we want to grow our population of people we treat, et cetera, all these things are sort of baseline. Then the second one is, how do we align on the future environment? How is the way the world works? How is it going to change? And how do we think about trends in the ecosystem that we live in and how that's going to be different? And jobs to be done, which I'll talk about, is how do we think about what are people hiring us or partnering with us to do? What are their jobs they're trying to get done? Then we get to, if this is the way the future looks like and the implications of the future, how do we put ourselves in that future? How do we blueprint ourselves, like the Steve Jobs blueprinting the digital hub and then those consumer, it's a vision, it's an impressionist painting of, what are the goals that we want to achieve and the core opportunities we want to play in? What are the businesses, capabilities if we're going beyond what we have today? We literally blueprint the future state. That becomes our vision narrative based on having looked at the future environment. Then we walk it back. We do milestone planning in reverse. We say, if this is what we want to look like in 2030, what do we want to look like in 2029? In order to make 2030, this is what do we need to look like in 2028? And so you're working backwards. Then what any leader does in running an organization, aside from providing great care, is your responsibility is to allocate resources. And so how do you allocate resources then today over the next couple of years towards initiatives that are going to lead you to that intended future state? So what are the portfolio of projects and things that you need to do in addition to running your core business each and every day? And then finally, how do we develop the path forward? How do we actually organize teams if we need to? We have a work plan, we have the steps, the implementation, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the thinking and the process of FutureBack. Now, just conscious of time, I'm going to move fairly quickly, but this is the example of blueprinting and walking back in a very tangible example, which is the blueprint of the future was like, well, our core business is going to continue, but it's going to decline the way it is today because of all the change. So we're actually thinking about major new opportunities of growth or the way we're going to work. And then all of that together is going to achieve our financial goals. I'm not saying this would be exactly, in your situation, but in many companies we work with, they're dealing with a decline in the core. And what they're trying to do is maximize the way their core business is, but then transform into a very new and different business. You could imagine, ideally what Blockbuster would need to do is to say, let's maximize what we're doing there, but we need to go to something different. The other example is newspapers. Newspapers, let's maximize our print business and our editorial and stuff, but it's declining. We have to get into digital and online. And they had to kind of step one foot off the boat and put it into the other and actually do both. And this is kind of an example of like looking at how you're managing core as a portfolio and then walk it back to these initiatives of core, adjacent, new growth today. That's the example of blueprinting and walking back. We had more time, it's in the book in more detail, but my point about skill set and tool set are there tools that you can use that can help think this through, and there are. And so it's using, along with the mindset, the tool set to be able to do these things. I'll just say quickly, I said it before, the dialogue of explore and discover or FutureBack is very different than running a regular meeting. It's an active learning process, highly collaborative, on how you bring a team together of different disciplines to talk about the future. It's iterative process of diverging and converging, because you're dealing with ambiguity. And it's not just left brain analytical. You got to become, the other way to deal, if you're going to deal with future proofing and dealing with disruptive change, is how do you become architects, not just analysts? Marv talked about this last phase we're in the era, where we're all becoming very analytical because of digital and everything. I would argue and this concludes for business schools and stuff. I mean, an MBA is so analytical. Look at all these different spreadsheets and analytical ways you can do things in all these industries. But really, the future is as much about the creative process and the architecting process because of how fast things change, in dealing with the business model. So this now gets into the second. I promise I will go. I have about 11 minutes, but I think I can do this pretty quick. This just gives you now into this point about being relentlessly outside in. Maybe this is additive. How can you even get more deeper to understanding the customer, the patient, the partner, and it's called jobs to be done because we want to understand at the fundamental level, what is a person, an individual, back to human beings, what are they trying to get done in their life? I'm using another technology example. This is Scott Cook's Intuit company's QuickBooks, which came out in 2005, and it was an amazing success. Now, there were all kinds of accounting software that was available in the mid-2000s, but when QuickBooks came out, it transformed the industry. And it was very interesting what was the understanding. So this was for small businesses. And what QuickBooks did in its understanding is it said, what's the number one thing if you're a small business owner, what you're trying to do? You're starting up something. The number one issue of any company that's starting up or running is don't run out of cash. People are not accountants. They're not trying to figure out all those things that happen, from T statements and business balance sheets and all that. They're simply trying to run their business and at the same time not run out of cash. And so QuickBooks made it super simple, and its focus was helping the small business owner not run out of cash. It was simplicity on the other side of complexity, and it's what transformed the industry. But it focused on, I am a human being, I'm a small business owner, my main, most important underserved job is don't run out of cash. The innovation nailed what was the core issue of the job to be done. There's a famous quote from Ted Levitt, who's a marketing professor at Harvard Business School. He said, people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill, they want to buy a 1/4-inch hole. So this is what we're trying to get at. What is the whole versus, instead of what's the need, like we need, these product attributes or anything, what's the job? What's the whole? What's somebody trying to get done in their life? The fundamental task or problem the consumer is trying to get done in a particular circumstance. Focus not on the 1/4-inch drill, but focus on the whole. It's not about the solution at first or the what, it's about the why and the how. So it's focused on the job and the why. And then here's another critical piece, and you guys will appreciate it in the world you're in, but it's not so appreciated in the corporate, the bigger, larger corporate world. It's not just the functional job that somebody's trying to get done. It's also their emotional and social job. We use this simple example about cars. It's getting from where I am to where I want to go. But cars also have an emotional component to why you hire a car to do something. It's to feel like I have a private driver, or to feel like I'm young again, or whatever. And then the social side is show that I'm part of the digital generation. So how do you think about individuals in especially your customer, your patient, their functional, emotional, and social jobs? They want to spend more time with their family, kind of get at that deeper. We find that deep outside in becomes even more critical in the world of disruption. And then prioritize those jobs. What are the ones that you can assess of a bunch of different things are the most important jobs for the constituent you're considering, that currently the alternatives they have are very unsatisfied? That's your opportunity to innovate. Because if it's not important, why would you innovate on a job that your customer says is not important? And if it's highly satisfied, that just means it's been well served and it's just very tight competition to do. But if you can find important, unsatisfied, high value jobs, those are the priorities by which you can develop solutions that can take you to the next level, especially enabled by technology. Now, finally, understand your business model. You know, people say, what's my business model? You know, the business model is going to change. And you say to a company, what's your business model? You do a set of interviews, you'll get 10 different answers because there's no framing for what is a business model. So this is the way to think about it in words. A business model defines how do you create value for your customer? How do you capture value for yourself? Because you need to capture value for yourself if you're a for-profit company, but even if you're mission-oriented, you have to sustain yourself. And then how do you repeatably deliver that value to your customer while capturing it for yourself? That's the definition of a business model. And how that translates to the customer value proposition. What's the job or set of jobs this customer is trying to get done? And how do you satisfy it with a service offering to that customer, a service, a product? How do you deliver it? What's the means by which they receive it? How do you price it? That all comes into the value proposition. That's how you create value for them. Obviously, the more value you create for them at a lower price, the higher the value proposition is for them. Value capture, pretty simple. It's the profit formula and the core mission. That's how you capture the value for yourself. Is it accretive to your income statement and the margins you need? Are you getting sufficient velocity of patients to be able to continue to drive your business? And then delivery. Every company, every organization is made up of a set of key resources and processes. That's how the work gets done. Functional processes. These things work so that you can work day to day in routines. And you don't even over time fully think about it, right? Because we are creatures of habit. You know, we wouldn't want to go to work every day and redesign things, right? We want to run things, and we run it by the business model. How do we make sure that these things are running the right way? The value proposition is doing what it's supposed to do. You're making money the way you're supposed to make it, and you have the team and the processes working together. You have rules, norms, and metrics. That's that circle you can see there. Those are the guiding overlay so that when you hire new people and everything, they follow rules and they follow norms, and you have specific metrics that they need to live by. That's to make sure they're consistent with continuing to move your business model. But that's what you need to document. You need to understand what is your business model. And that gets to, I'm going to skip this for time, but that's just an example, serial business model innovator. Another tool in the tool set would be what we call a business model canvas. This is just a way to lay out the assumptions of what is your business model today? What are the customer attributes, if you will? Who's your competition and the barriers? What's the solution in terms of your service offering? What's the patient pathway, you could say? What are the channels to reaching patients? And you can see this, there's an operating model. What are the critical capabilities? You have the resources that really matter. You can document this. And all this is a way to document the assumptions about the way your business works, from this value proposition to the patient, customer, the profit formula, cost structure, what things drive your costs, the revenue, where do you get the revenue from, even risks and assumptions. It's a template by which to just document your assumptions about the way your business works, that then you can say, based on the environment and future back, what are the pressures on these assumptions? What things might need to change? And so how do I start architecting, envisioning a different business model? Because maybe you just can't increment your way into the future. You have to fundamentally shift. This goes back to transformation. Like the newspaper industry, it wasn't enough for them just to say, oh, well, we'll just kind of keep print going. No, they had to actually transform the core print business. They actually had to do cost transformation to take large costs out to be able to fund the digital business, but also to maximize the time that print was going to be able to last. That kind of gets at the key and the last thing I'm going to say, which is how do we think about digital and then AI in particular? Well, there are three main things that digital AI do. One is you're digitizing core processes, and by doing that, you're creating efficiencies for the organization. You're creating, it's a cost focus. I mean, honestly, right? And so how do you make the organization more efficient? That then leads to it doesn't cost as much. The second is, how do we improve the customer experience? That's the other thing which digital and AI can do is, how do we digitize the stakeholder interfaces so that we can better create customer experience, personalized medicine, right? You know, customized experiences for the individual, being able to allow it to be, you know, more unique to them. Those are the kind of key things also that digital can do. And then finally, it can create new platforms or new digital businesses. It can do, that's honestly what startups in your world are trying to do. They're trying to create platforms and pick off different parts of what digital, but in our view, given data and given digital technologies like AI, you've got three things that you can do that you're doing for your business, for your customers. You're driving costs down, efficiency, innovation. You're becoming more intimate with your patient and your customers. That's the digitizing of the interface. And you have the opportunity to create new business models. And so with that, you know, I'll leave this last thing that we have put together, which is we think the adoption of AI, you know, starts with some of these simplified things, you know, in terms of back office, and then it's going to work its way to doing some things in R&D. But then it's going to be, as I think has been mentioned here, it's going to be a long time, you know, before I think it gets into really the individual patient and health management, the things that you just want to protect in terms of the nature of it. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, what I want you to take away from all of this is there is a way to navigate the future and future-proof your business, no matter how daunting these things no matter how daunting they may be. And it's, again, being able to get comfortable with envisioning the future and having those discussions, being able to always step back and say, what's the job to be done of our different constituents, especially the prospective patient, and what are they trying to get done in their life from a social, emotional, and functional view? How do we understand our business model and how it needs to change given the way we've looked at the future and the implications of it? And then let the AI follow instead of lead, because there's, as you know, there's a lot of hoopla about it, but the AI should be in service to better care, not, you know, the tail wagging the dog, right? And it comes through leadership, and it comes through vision, and it comes through just being able to adopt these things that you can get by reading books as to a better mindset, skill set, and tool set. And with that, I appreciate you giving me the time to share this, and I think it's helpful.